You might have a colleague that you have that consultation relationship with. So it is a safe zone. You have that agreement already that you've met. We're going to use each other as professional consultants. I'm not going to say my client's name, date of birth, address, or too many identifying features, but I might say I'm working with a client who's, who's employed in this industry, or I'm working with a client who's a parent, or kind of globalize their experience by their identity, but
No
give
specifics.
them the right, give them the, and this is what happened,
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. But there's some worthwhile information that could be to the betterment of our lives.
Yeah.
And it's a balance, right? So it's a balance of, there are some mindless humors. That's why men like Three Stooges. Okay, why do men like the Three Stooges? Because the Three Stooges, you don't have to think.
Nope, just do.
They are not erudical people where they're ultra high-end intellectuals. No, it's silly, comic stuff where I can just watch it and laugh. I don't have to think about it. I know why they're doing it. There's no hidden agenda. So that, like, it's
so true.
In that same point, and I think women need to really get involved in the Three Stooges because they're very important.
I watch I Love Lucy.
I Love Lucy's pretty good too. Where, so there's a funny one. So I Love Lucy is a social experiment. Lucille Ball was probably one of the most powerful, funny, driven, smart women. And watch what she does on I Love Lucy. She she panders to the camera.
Absolutely.
And she's the exact opposite. If you've ever watched anything.
She was ruthless, apparently.
Yeah, she was a businesswoman. And that's what made her successful.
Yep.
So I'm a big believer in that stuff. Now, you've seen the changing atmosphere of the mental health field firsthand on the front lines. Early on in your career, you were probably taught to treat a certain way, and then the evolution came in. And can you pick out one thing that's changed drastically over the course of your career? Your career's lasted a very long time.
It has. Sometimes when I say it out loud, I scare myself. Some of the students look at me like, "Oh my goodness!" I said, "I know." It is really kind of mind blowing to think about. When I was first going into college, starting this career, we didn't really know much about. We didn't even really call it HIV yet. It was still AIDS.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was a gay disease.
Right.
That was another thing.
And we had no idea. So just like that.
I remember that. I forget. I think Mark and Nick were in here.
Oof.
Where when they're sitting in front of me, I'm like, do you understand if you guys came out a long time ago, I would think you'd have AIDS, because that's how we were taught.
In that period of the early 80s, one of my first intern experiences in undergrad was University Health Services, and UNH was one of the first campuses in the country to offer on-site HIV testing. And when our director said to us, listen, the half dozen of us interns or whatever, they're like, the university's going to start offering this service, and you are all the ones who are going to be here doing the counseling and the intake with people when they're coming in to get tested. So you're all going to get tested first. The terror that we all experienced, wondering whether or not we were going to be handed a death note, and we had to wait 3 weeks to find out back then. It was insane when it was like, oh, this is real, right? Yeah. And part of the big campaign then think about it, in the 80s, college campuses, all the partying that was going on.
Oh, yeah.
I can't tell you how many beers I had thrown at me and dumped on me when I would go around and do this AIDS and alcohol education program trying to get these fraternity brothers to wear condoms. The only fun part was when they said, they don't fit. And I took one out and opened it, pulled it over my head. And I said, I dare you to beat me.
They don't fit. Oh, God, what a man thing to say.
Well, that was right. In the 80s, I'm like, go ahead. Anybody want to beat it? And they're like, okay, we'll take some.
Yeah.
But honestly, we had to bring in pictures of people who were in advanced stages of AIDS to show them, this is not a joke.
It's scary to watch I mean, if you put this in context of the current pandemic and COVID, where people, I I don't know how to put this without making a statement. That's just not what I'm trying to do. One of them was, got to do this, got to do this, got to do this, and everybody just sort of complied, where HIV could have been really managed by using something 100%, 100%, well, not 100%, 99%.
Right.
And people were still resistant to it.
Right.
And,
Right.
you know, where this is a little different because some of the things they told us weren't true.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
But
know.
that goes back huge to the secrets, right? Because then, if anybody was even, if they were gay or bi, right, and weren't societally or outwardly even pretending to be straight, that was a whole thing, right? Being closeted. And then the connection of, even if you were going to come out, then people then would think, well, if you come out, then you're gay. And if you're gay, you must have the gay disease. And it was just like this whole, like,
gay disease, yeah.
The secrets around that were intense
I
as
mean-
far as people's activities and who they liked and who they didn't like, and a lot of fear.
And now look where we are 40 years later. Some people, you know, you have HIV and AIDS, they live a completely full life.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think Magic Johnson sort of opened a lot of eyes to that. But you treat people, I mean, even going back into the 80s when you started treating, mental health was not at the forefront. It's, you know, it was very, very stigmatized. It was incredibly stigmatized as something you get and you have.
You don't want your boss to know. You don't
Nope.
want your neighbor to know. Some people don't want their partner to know, or their kids, or their parents, or, you know, yes, it's still, and the stigma programs have been out for, gosh, probably a couple of decades by now, and there's maybe small dents. I think one of the things that has helped is that people who have a public face of some level that people can relate to, that they go, oh, they go to therapy? Oh, maybe it isn't.
That's why I go out and talk.
Yeah.
Okay, because I am not your stereotypical person that has. If you were to look at me at face value, you would think that I'm very shut off, that I'm not willing to talk about my mental health struggles. But here's the thing: while I am capable of aggression, I'm also capable of extreme vulnerability. And if you make fun of me for my vulnerability, I will punch you in the face. That's pretty much it.
Right.
But if I'm able to do, I can't expect anybody to open up to me if I'm unwilling to open up to me, because vulnerabilities are what connect you to other people. Your strengths don't. You know, you impress people with your strengths. You connect to them through your vulnerabilities. I've said that before, and I believe that because I could tell you. You know, you could tell me all your accolades, and I know you have a lot of them. I've done this, 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 and this. I'm like, oh, wow, that's great. But if you were to tell me, hey, I've had times of doubt, I've had times of self unworthiness, well, guess what? Then I start going, really? Tell me more. Tell me more about that. Because I've had those same feelings, and now all of a sudden we have this connection.
Which is why Michelle Obama's book on imposter syndrome was so popularly read and absorbed, because the concept of, I'm in this position doing these things and people are looking to me, and I'm like, I'm not perfect.
Nope.
I'm far from perfect. It's like, wait a minute.
Look at a perfect person, and they are just better at hiding it.
Yeah. It's usually a mask.
Yeah, they're just better at hiding it. And I like to highlight my deficiencies because I have a lot of them. And I'm sure you have a lot of them too. And once you let them go, once you release them, to me, I feel better. So this is the crux of everything right here. You get these secrets from people who are sitting in front of you. How the hell? Because some of the stuff is juicy. Some of the stuff is like salacious. How the hell do you compartmentalize all these?
Well, right. So what do you do with it? If it's just like, I can't even believe this is something that's kind of spectacular. You might have a colleague that you have that consultation relationship with. So it is a safe zone. You have that agreement already that you've met. We're going to use each other as professional consultants. I'm not going to say my client's name, date of birth, address, or too many identifying features, but I might say, I'm working with a client who's, who's employed in this industry, or I'm working with a client who's a parent, or kind of globalize their experience by their identity, but
No
give them
specifics.
the right, give them
Yeah.
the, and this is what happened, you know, and then they can kind of give you some feedback, right? Is it exciting? Sometimes it's exciting. Sometimes we have a client where we're like, we have a client that's pretty like I gotta really like triple, quadruple make sure that nobody even sees them coming or going. They've asked me for the appointments that are first or last for those very reasons. You know, they really want to maintain that privacy. In addition to the confidence that's professional, they don't even want anybody to know they're coming. That's real tough. Easier to do with telehealth, you know, because they can lock themselves in a room someplace and that nobody has to know that they've logged on.
Yeah,
But
but
if they're
it's
coming
not.
to your office,
But it's not the same.
yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, during the pandemic was the first time I finally cried and said, oh, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
You kind of have to.
You kind of have to stay afloat.
Yes, and people needed us, you know, and if we couldn't be out there, well, how are they else? They're going to have the, okay, well, we're going to have to do it. Didn't work for everybody, though. I mean, I worked with
I stopped going to
kids on
therapy
the
during that.
spectrum, and that was really challenging for a lot of them.
I did not. I stopped going to therapy during lockdown because it's the same reason I don't do Zoom podcasts here, because I got to be able to feel what you're feeling.
It's tough.
And I need to look in your eyes, and I need to see, okay, are you giving me all of it, or are you holding some back? How long do you think you're going to keep doing this?
Not sure. I'll tell you one thing. Switching it up and not doing only individual therapy is probably another safety valve that I've built into my career.
I know you're involved in a lot of stuff. You want to give everybody.
Well, you know, thinking about the things that affect the profession, right? Being involved in that macro level way of looking at the advocacy, because the things that affect the profession, when we make our statements and policy statements about social issues, they're often used by lawmakers, right?
So you got to be very careful. There's a lot of responsibility.
Right. So in New Jersey, an example of that is because of my involvement with my National Association of Social Workers New Jersey chapter. I think it might have been the year that I was vice president. I'm not even sure anymore, but it was whatever the year was that the testimony was going on for the anti-conversion therapy bill.
Oh yeah.
Gave testimony then. You know, there's work with the marriage equality bill. Testimony there. Last year, served on the governor's anti-bullying task force. Those kind of policy level things with our National Association of Social Workers. Served on a committee to write the policy statement for social workers on parental kidnapping. You know, those governance level things that affect how social workers operate affect how we provide the services to our clients.
You have an enormous amount of power when it comes to that, because you are, but responsibility, and you have the ability to change the paradigm of what has been.
We try.
And that's all you can do. That's all. So I have a problem with the politics getting involved in it, and I understand the reason for it getting involved, because it becomes a campaign slogan, where you are sitting on the other end of it saying, all right, well, it may be a campaign slogan, but I can do some good with that campaign slogan, and I can actually enact some changes that I want to. So how do you find that balance?
Mostly through looking at what the profession identifies as our values, right? And when we compare, who's the candidate? Are they looking at what issues are affecting the people, and how are they affecting the people or not? Is it consistent with what we would say is seeking to have equity, inclusivity, fairness, justice, or not? Other therapists don't have in their code of ethics an entire piece on social justice. Social workers do. What many people don't know historically is that we just passed Labor Day, right? Labor Day is a holiday that was suggested by a social worker who was actually working as the Secretary of Labor.
I didn't know that.
Mhm.
I didn't know. Well, I know that
Thank
now.
a social worker for last Monday's holiday. Frances Perkins.
Frances Perkins. See, again, that's something that needs to be highlighted, because a lot of people, the one thing with social work is they're throwing a lot at social workers right now that I don't really like. They're getting them involved in the law enforcement aspect of it, and that's I don't know whether that's the right thing. You're a secondary response when it comes to that stuff, and you're not equipped for that. That's not the job you signed up for. But they're expecting you to do so much more with a limited amount of tools, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. Social, you always have to kind of stay in your lane. You know, law enforcement can't be social workers. Well, you can, but we are first responders, but we need social workers, and social workers need cops. So the one thing that I think is falling by the wayside is the synergy between the two.
Right.
All right. If you have a good synergy between the two, hey, listen, I went to this place. Now let me call in the reinforcements, just like you call in your reinforcements when needed, when you have something that's beyond your scope. And I think that's pretty important. So what do you got coming up on the horizon?
Stuff going on with, I guess, carrying this message to the average person, right? Therapy is something that's very personal, but taking care of oneself, um, either preventatively or if something happens, how do you handle it? What do you do to process it, right? We live in a very weird period of time, and nobody's immune from stuff going down and stuff happening. So, from that perspective, um, my friend Mark and I are working to put together training programs to help lay people get a basic understanding of preventative mental health care, self care, and how to take care of oneself if there is some sort of critical incident, as well as the physical end of that. Because we all know, as much as we love Star Trek, we don't have Beam Me Over Scotty. And some time elapses before anybody actually gets there, no matter what it is, unless you live next door. So, otherwise, it's going to be a few minutes, and a few minutes can matter.
But there's rare people in the world like you, and there's rare people in the world like Mark. And I'm just going to give, and I don't know you as well as I know Mark, but I'm going to tell you what kind of person Mark is. And Mark's recommendation of you says you're of the same, cut from the same cloth. When Mike died, Mark and I had a lot of discussions. He was there for me. Tom Flynn was there for me. Mike DePalma, Bobby Crudell. These are people who were there for me. And Mark and I had a lot of discussions about this stuff. And as a matter of fact, the day of Mike's funeral, I recorded in here, and I felt like I had to. It was like aversion therapy almost. Mark sat in the control room to make sure I was okay. Yeah. And that's the type of people we need in this world, because regardless of where you sit, regardless of your label, we're all human beings. We all hurt the same way. So the one universal truth out of everything is everybody experiences pain sometime in their life. Everybody experiences suffering at some time in their life. And if we start looking at people like that, I think the world's going to be a better place. Rather than say, well, you're a woman and I'm a man, so we must experience stuff different. Yes, that is true to some extent, but there's a lot of things that we experience very similar. So, Kathy, do you want to throw out some plugs? You got anything you want to plug?
Well, I guess if people wanted to talk more about what that training is, the Care and Safety Initiative, reach out through the LinkedIn, message me. Definitely talk to you about what Mark and I are doing more about that. As far as my stuff with social work, nothing too exciting, although this year delegate assembly is my new role, and that is where, I guess, in a sense, it's like being a Congress, like being a representative to the profession. So some of the major issues for the profession that are being discussed are what we will be talking about. And I'm anticipating, although I have no insider knowledge, that one of the things that we'll be talking about is this multi-state licensure. Because of telehealth, providing access to more people across more no boundaries, right? That's been the hardest thing. And we found out during the pandemic that people who live in rural areas, people who are on really tight schedules, there are people who live on the East Coast who are on shift and they want to do therapy at midnight, but therapists on the East Coast are not doing sessions at midnight. But somebody who's licensed in New Jersey who's living in California, it's only 9 o'clock. They might still do a session. So these realities are becoming huge in terms of access, because part of the stigma is if it can't be commonplace and it's not accessible, right? If people can access it, then it's commonplace, right?
So you're looking to give people access.
Yes. I mean, resource and access is the number one thing that if you're not engaged in traditional psychotherapy or psychiatric care, you're probably receiving some sort of case management guidance, which is around resources and other types of services that may not be driven by you're not having a treatment for depression, let's say, but you're poor and you have food insecurity. You need resources for that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where you go. People don't even have access to those information lists half the time because if they don't have access to the internet because they can't afford it, so it becomes this kind of like snowballing. Resources, always about resources and access.
And I think the more time that goes on, the more resources are coming out, and the more people are starting to stand up and say, "Enough of this crap. Let's get it done. Let's get to work."
We have the technology.
We can rebuild
do
them.
this, right?
We can rebuild them. We have the technology.
That's right. Wasn't that one of your favorite shows?
Oh, $6 Million Man. God, I love the $6 Million Man.
Did you love the Bionic Woman as much?
No, I'm a Steve Austin guy.
I liked them both. I liked the fact that she could hear.
I liked looking
everything.
at Lindsay Wagner. I liked looking at her. But Steve Austin, listen, he was my guy.
Well, I used to channel that sonic hearing from her all the time. And I think it came in handy when I was doing adolescent group because I could hear everything that everybody said.
I think all parents are given that when their kids are born.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. So we're coming to the end of this thing. And you have kept so many secrets in. You've lived this life of service. And it's had to, the suffering that you've witnessed, that you've endured personally, has had to have taught you something. Because if it hasn't taught you anything, God, what a wasted lesson. What do you think the suffering of keeping secrets has taught you?
Mostly that you don't have to keep the secret so much as the confidence of. And that's where I say with, talking to a peer, I can say, I'm having a hard time because this issue's come up with this client and this is what's happening. And my peer can help me work through that. If it's personal, you can talk to your therapist or you can talk to your friend or your other support system. It's keeping it in at all cost. That's going to be the unhealthy part about the secret. It's the same as stress. Stress can manage you or you can manage your stress. And secrets are kind of the same. I can manage what I need to keep confidence or it's going to manage me because it's going to make me start to think I can't tell anybody anything. It wasn't meant to be that way.
Yeah, it's information. So what you're looking at is you're the keeper of information, and information is the most valuable resource or the most valuable weapon.
Yeah.
But thankfully, there's people like you that are willing to keep those secrets. And Kathy, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming in, talking about this stuff. I think I could probably talk to you all day about this stuff. And I always keep me abreast of what you and Mark are doing because I'm going to be one of your biggest champions because I believe in both of you.
We might have to have you come along on one of our trips.
I'll be glad to. I'll be glad to.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this episode of The Suffering Podcast, The Suffering of Secrets with Kathy Dixon. And let's think about all the stuff that we learned. Perspective can breed a feeling of gratitude. Helping people is definitely an addiction. Take time for yourself. Everyone needs a safe zone, but most importantly, keep confidence and let it out. And that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to go to popple.com, put in the code TSP20 for a 20% discount on your digital business card. Follow us on all social media. That's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X, OnlyFans. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson, and of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. And we're going to see you on the next episode.